All right, can everybody hear me okay and see my screen?
I can hear and see you, or see your
Awesome.
screen.
Awesome. Okay, so hi everybody. I'm Brittany Bianco. I work in the office as one of the PDCs, and then I also work on the sociocultural effects for OEM and for our projects. So we're going to do a little bit of an intro to sociocultural effects, or SCE, now. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so what is all included in an SCE evaluation? The sociocultural effects evaluations include, the impacts to our human environment.
Brittany, we cannot hear you.
You can't hear me at all?
I can hear you, Brittany.
I can hear.
Okay, if for some reason you can't hear me, let me know. But anyway, so the SCE is the impacts to our human environment. This is going to be looking at our communities and how our projects are going to involve or affect those communities. It's also going to be looking at assessing the impacts potentially with civil rights and what are the values and the community concerns within the area that our projects are going to affect. Okay, so SCE evaluations consider both current actions and also things that have happened in the past. So if we've built a project that, let's say, divides a community in half in the past, we're going to be looking at those impacts and what we're doing now, and how it bridges the gap between both the past and current, and then also the future. So like we were talking about with the future, the SCE evaluations do inform those future phases by looking at the potential for the project effects, what is out in the community, those characteristics, if there's any opportunities. Also, we're going to look for those solutions within this evaluation, and that will lead then to hopefully informed decision making on the effects to the community. So SCE is a pretty broad topic. It includes 6 separate issues. You can see that we kind of have the acronym SELMAR, which covers all 6. So you have your social impacts, your economic impacts, your land use impacts, mobility, aesthetic effects, and relocation potential. And we'll go into a little bit more detail on what each one of those sections mean moving forward. But first, we want to know is who's out there? What populations are out within our project area? And also make sure that we're paying attention to those vulnerable populations. And these vulnerable populations are ones that are protected under the Environmental Justice Executive Order. This would include communities that are low income, also Title VI, which includes race, color, national origin, and there's also related legislation that covers then disability, sex or gender, age, and religion. And both of those, the Title VI and the Environmental Justice Executive Order, both cover then minority populations as well. So in a little bit more detail, that environmental justice analysis that's done as part of your SCE is going to include who is out there and where they are. If there's an adverse effect footprint, how is that adverse effect distributed among who's out there? Is it centralized in a location that's primarily low income, or is it impacting the whole community? If it's disproportionate, how severe is that adverse effect? And can these effects be resolved in any way? And then we want to make sure that we're making those conclusions. What are the conclusions from that analysis? So SCE, you can see the 6 different topics we're talking about on the right. And these areas of population, community cohesion, safety and emergency, community goals, and quality of life. It is all interrelated. All of these issues inform one or the other or multiple areas. So that is why these are grouped together in our documents, because the information used to analyze those all are interrelated in some way. So we want to make sure that we're getting the whole picture. We want to look at the community data. We also want to look at information we gain from field reviews. And also, what is the public telling us in our public involvement activities? How can all of this help us figure out what the analysis is and what information is important? So to do that, we have our SCE evaluation toolkit. This includes the environmental screening tool, which I believe was touched on this morning with ETDM, the US Census Bureau products that we get, and then also your local government plans, things from municipalities, sorry, can't talk today, and your community outreach plans, things like that are gonna help all involve and inform then our analysis. So let's talk a little bit more about the individual issues. First up is gonna be social. Your social issue is going to cover your population, your community cohesion, the safety and emergency, community goals, and quality of life. And this is going to include a demographic kind of snapshot is what we call it, where it shows us the total population in the area, the race and the ethnicity, the backgrounds, your average age of the community, what kind of education that the people in that community have, whether there's disability status, whether it's an English-speaking community, what languages are spoken if it isn't, or if English is a second language in that community. Your income and poverty levels, whether or not this area relies heavily on transit, so your vehicle availability, and also your housing types and potential value. Is this going to be apartment homes? Is this going to be condos, single family residence, multiple family residence? All of that plays into your social. So your social, so on the left you can see it says social creatures need social environments and quality connections between. So a lot of that has to do with, we have these three individual sections. We talk about our home, our neighborhood, and then also those gathering places, those community centers, sometimes churches, schools, where is the community gathering to interact with each other? Moving on to economic, this is going to be more of your commerce, your tax bases, your employment, and your social economic generators. Are we impacting somewhere that is heavy with large factories and companies? Are we taking away something that is providing jobs in the area? Are we taking something away that provides a high level of commerce, like an outlet mall that brings in millions of dollars a year based on the number of people who come and visit? It can include all of those different things. So transportation can influence that, not just from maybe taking the property, but also, your transportation costs, business markets, job access. Are we changing the access to a location? Personal travel costs, and then also your quality of the location and the space. Next up is land use. So you'll learn a little bit more about land use and aesthetics later, but to touch on this, you're talking about your landscape character. Is it open space? Is there recreation? Again, is there businesses? Is it housing? What is the growth and development policies and your adopted land use plans? And those adopted land use plans are again going to come in to your community comprehensive plans, the municipalities, again, pretty much anything that has that kind of future planning for an area. So land use changes do occur over time, right? We expand, we build, we tear down. So, are we changing that accessibility? Have our land values changed from, let's say we've done a project in the past, have they changed from then to now? Is there an investment in future development? Population, has that increased or decreased in employment? And then also, what about our tax revenues? Mobility. So when you're looking at mobility, you're talking about your different choices, transit, rail, biking, pedestrians, automotive. Are these connected? Is there good circulation in the area? Is public parking available? And also, are those other transit opportunities and transportation for disadvantaged people available? Those are things that we're going to be looking at as part of this. And the difference between mobility and accessibility, I definitely wanted to touch on this because mobility is the ability of people to make trips to satisfy those needs and desires. And also it can be any combination of those modes, whereas accessibility is the area-wide measure of the ease of that travel between locations within a defined area. So mobility is the ability for it to occur, whereas accessibility is more of the measure of the ease of that. So accessibility factors include your connectivity and continuity, mobility choices, physical abilities, land use patterns, and urban design plays a large role in that. And then also your quality and affordability of those options. Aesthetic effects, we're talking here about noise and vibration, visual compatibility, scenic views, community focal points. Do you have a park that has statues or something that we're wanting to preserve and protect? Their local aesthetic values. Do you have certain, let's say we're changing a roadway, are there different light posts or something that is consistent throughout the community that we'll have to take into account in order to replace to be consistent with the aesthetic features for that area, and then making sure that those projects are compatible. So some of those different elements of aesthetics include everything from buildings and bridges, landscapes, ponds, public art or murals. Let's see, your sunlight, your shadows, urban design, your views. It takes into account everything that you see and hear and feel and notice in the area. It's not just, oh, there's a bridge over off in the distance that I can see. Well, okay, is it just a bridge? Is there lighting on that bridge? It all plays into this feel of the environment. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit here about relocations. And, these are your relocations for residential, non-residential, your community institutions, and also some of the unique and special facilities that may not be present in other areas or may be more difficult to move. So SCE is completed within 6 steps. So we have 6 issues and also 6 steps. So 6 is the magic number. And for step 1, we're going to be reviewing that project information. Let's look at that study area, make sure that we're defining that area in the best way possible, preparing that community information and evaluating then those SCE effects based on all of the data that we've compiled. Step 5 is one of the most important, and that's actually recommending ways to resolve the issues that we find based on the project in the study area by all of the information that we've looked at. And then step 6 is to actually document those results. So in a little bit more detail, your project information to review, you're looking again at that context data, public input, agency input, field reviews, community outreach. For defining your study area, things that can help do that would be maybe previous SCE evaluations done on a similar project. What are some of those project characteristics? Context is extremely important in this area, and then looking at the potential for those effects. And then your community information, which we've talked about extensively so far, includes your demographics, community boundaries, important resources, community history and trends, and then also your goals and values of that community. So step 4 is to evaluate those effects. And when we're saying to evaluate, we're looking at identifying those resources. Again, making sure that we're documenting the demographics, the resource data, the public input. When you're assessing your effects, then you're looking at your effect types. Are we having direct effects on like changing the population in that area with relocations, removing a facility or facility access, and also impacting emergency response time? Indirect effects could be something like a new community that is built as a result, or a community being removed as a result of a project, but not one that we as an agency have moved. And then also cumulative effects. So those existing burdens or potential project effects and future actions that could result from our project, not just in the immediate time frame, but also looking toward the future. So supplemental data would include then your demographics, community plans, EMS services, police and fire, facility user groups, field reviews, and prior public input is extremely important when assessing your effects. And then gauging that severity. So, what is the type, quality, and sensitivity of those resource groups? How likely is it that it's going to occur or reoccur? Is there going to be a duration where it starts at, let's say, the beginning of construction and ends halfway through? Or is it something that's going to continue even after the project is complete? And then is there potential for mitigation or even migration where people are moving into or out of the affected community? So for recommending our solutions, we're going to inventory those effects. We're going to identify those goals and restating negative effects as potential positive future conditions, right? So we're maybe removing a community from the project area in order to connect two facilities together to decrease travel times. Somehow turning the negatives into a positive. And then also developing those strategies in order to, at the end of it all, recommend a positive solution. And then making sure that we document the results in our environmental document so it's clear that the evaluation was done consistently and also correctly. So we want to make sure that we're telling the story with context, data, how we compiled all of that data with our methodology, your public involvement and input, what were some of the key findings, and then what are the recommendations that we are making in the environmental document in regards to SCE. The key is to make sure that we are using the plain language, so anybody who reads this will understand to the best of their ability what we're talking about and why. So I know that was essentially a crash course through SCE and very broad overview. We do have the SCE website as a tangent off of our OEM website with additional tools there, as well as the manual chapter, part 2, chapter 4 for SCE analysis. My contact information is on the screen, and I know we finished a few minutes early. Let's see. Rebecca, you asked how does, oh, sorry, Ruth.
No, it was okay. I was just going to read you the question, but you're reading it yourself. That's perfectly fine.
Okay. So you asked, how does any historic feature impact the SCE, like historic arch or other feature? So it can impact the SCE. Again, that would be something that would be a community, maybe a community feature or even an aesthetic feature. So it's going to depend on the project, whether or not it's something, you know, we're impacting or removing. But at the same time, you know, yes, we still have the additional historic analysis that's going to be done as well, but it's all interrelated. And that's what makes SCE so challenging, is that all of those different impact areas are related in so many different ways. So if you have a specific instance or a specific question on something like that, I'm happy to talk with you, Rebecca, at any time. Feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email, and we can set up time to discuss.